Hello, I just want to go through some very simple things that Mounds doesn't really cover that are very, very practical. It's really the end of the story, so to speak, of when you get to a point where you're using Greek to do some exegesis in a Bible class or for a sermon. You need to be able to negotiate very quickly about whereabouts you're going to go in your passage so that you're not stumbling through the Greek New Testament to find out it takes you too long to get there, to get to your passage before you start looking and doing exegesis and all the work that you have to do to unwrap the text, so to speak. So I've got here the Greek New Testament 4th edition. I suggested to you that you get the more updated one, which is the 5th edition, one by Kurt Allen, Matthew Black, and Martini. And this is really useful because it's got a dictionary in it. That's important that I mentioned in the syllabus, the first syllabus, that you get that. So you've got the whole thing in one. The key to it, though, is being able to do we've mentioned it in passing as Mounds, but we need to make sure we negotiate the capital letters, because the designation in terms of the chapters and the books are actually written in capital letters, and so therefore when you come across here, for example, kataioinon, then you need to know exactly what you're dealing with so you can do it quickly, katamatheon and so forth. Those letters are actually in capitals. So therefore, what it means is two things. You need to be aware of the movement then in your mind from the lowercase to the uppercase, to the capitals from the lowercase writing that we're doing. And to do that, then the first thing would be to make sure that you've got that alphabet memorized, as I said to you initially, in groups of 4, so that you work it: alpha, beta, gamma, delta, epsilon, zeta, eta, theta, iota, kappa, lambda, mu, nu, psi, omicron, pi, rho, sigma, tau, upsilon, phi, chi, psi, omega. That's how I've done it in groups of 4. And then you have the internal mechanism of knowing how it actually connects with the English alphabet. So you're fairly straightforward from that standpoint. So that, for example, if you're going to look up a word in English now that's begins with K, and you had to do it according to the alphabet, then you'd know, you're somewhere just over a third along with where K is, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, and so forth. And you can do that with the Greek, because that's going to help you. Obviously, the first few things are alpha, beta, gamma, delta. Now, gamma's going to throw you a bit because that's right at the beginning, and not further on, as in the English alphabet. So from the first thing is just to make sure that you memorize that, so that when you have to look up a word in the dictionary, you're not stumbling around at the back here and you're looking for a zeta, and so what you do is you think, that's a Z, so you go right back to the end of the dictionary looking under Z, looking for Z, and you're around omega and you're thinking, where am I? Well, if you know your Greek alphabet very thoroughly, then what? Alpha, beta, gamma, delta, epsilon, zeta. So it's right up the front, not toward the back. And likewise, there's other things in terms of the differences between the two E's and so on, and the two O's, omega and omicron and so forth. So really you need to know very, very thoroughly then the alphabet. So you go over it all the time so that you know it, and then you can easily negotiate the dictionary, because that's the key to it. It's hard enough to actually try and track down some of these words, so you don't get stuck with hang on a minute, where exactly am I? Theta, well, that's toward the end of the English alphabet, so again you're going further down the Greek the dictionary towards the end looking for theta, when it's really more up front: alpha, beta, gamma, delta, epsilon, zeta, eta, theta. So you do it from that standpoint. And then the other thing to remember is just the difference, so to speak, in the way that some of the capitals are, in terms of the way that they're the way that they look, so that you're familiar with them. I've put them up there so you can see, and I suggest that you go that, and what you do is you just say each letter of the alphabet, and at the same time look at it as a capital, so that when you come across then a kataioinon or katamarkon, you're looking immediately, because when you go in this Greek Testament, there's still a tendency to look at it and to be scared because you see all this Greek there. But what you need to do initially is, you know what you're looking for. What you're looking for is the top, because that's going to tell you what book it is, right? So when you know what book it is, if you're in Luke, then the next thing is you look to the right and you see the chapter, and then you look down the verse. So just in a few seconds, just like you do with an English text, you can find the book. You just hand this to somebody a good example is to hand it to somebody who doesn't know Greek, and they look at this and say, well, what is going on here? How do you negotiate this? Well, we're negotiating now in the trees, in all the different grammatical aspects of it, as we're now nearly 2/3 through the basic grammar. But just to remind you that as we start negotiating it, go back to simple things. In other words, then you know the alphabet most thoroughly, and that you're able then to look at these books in the New Testament. You open it, and you're not afraid whatsoever. Yes, Katayainen, you're looking straight away, but you're not looking at the text. What you're looking at is the top, and then on the right-hand side, that's going to tell you that's chapter 1. Then you need to chapter so-and-so. For example, I've got, just to give you an example, I've looked at Matthew chapter 11:28. So therefore, I immediately, Katamathion, there I go, I look to the left or right, depending where it is on the page, chapter 11, look down verse 28, I've now found it. That's basically all I'm saying, is that you get there as quickly as you can, because you've got to deal with it. You've got to deal with it now in terms of translation. And what helps you in your translation as you're looking at it is the words that you've obviously memorized and known, the vocabulary and the grammar and so on, but then you've got the added element of the dictionary at the back. So as we look then, I'm just going to give you just a couple more tools that might help you in respect to this. But first of all, let's just take a few things, very simple things in terms of the use of the dictionary. You might be thrown by, if you look at verse 28 in Greek, Deute pros, me pantes, hoi, kopiotes, kai, perfortis monoi, kago, anapauso humas. And you look and you say, Deute. Well, the best thing to do in that to me is, it's an irregular, it's an adverb, and it's an excitation. It means come. So you would look that up in the dictionary. Under alpha, beta, gamma, delta, etc. If you needed to do that, then you learn it off because it's irregular. And then most of the rest of that, you've got the preposition there, pros and so on, and the first person pronoun. And then there's a verb form there that's used. It's a present participle from kopiao. And you can work that back in terms of looking and seeing that the verbal stem there is obviously there's something behind that omega that's in there, and at this stage with the endings that we're learning that will take us through the present and different participles, then we'll be able to see that we can trace that back to look to find out what its original present form is, kopiao, which means to work hard. And then we can look at it and say, okay, we've now tracked that down, and we look at the next verb, perfortismenoi, and what we should be able to get into the point by this point is not to be looking and going to the dictionary and look under pi for that, because that's going to fool us, because we will start to recognize now that there are augments, suffixes and prefixes that will go on to particular tenses, and we know that then phi, when it's given a suffix, then a prefix, then that prefix is going to be a pi. So this is going to be in a perfect tense. It's actually a perfect passive or a perfect middle from forizzo, which you can actually work out too with the sigma that's in there, because you know that sigma then is going to be obviously a fruition of a delta with another sigma that will then mean the delta will drop out because it's dental is this verb. You get that from the verbal form, so that you're not looking at it in the form in the dictionary in terms of the perfect passive or perfect middle that it is here. You're looking at it in terms of its present form, which is fortizzo. And sometimes what you have to do is you have to spend a lot of time actually tracking that down. And I have to tell you, it's all worthwhile, even if it takes you half an hour to do it, because you learn things while you're doing it. Now, having said that, though, I'm going to show you just a slightly quicker way of doing it. The bad way is to get what's called an interlinear, which is something like the King James Version, and you have the Greek there, and underneath it you have a word for each one. That will not really help you. But something like this might help you. This is an analytical Greek New Testament. And so what you have is, you have the Greek in the whole of the New Testament, and then under it are symbols. And the symbols are given, they're given at the front of the book and the back of the book, and they're on this little card. And what the symbols do is they tell you the form of the verb. or the noun of whatever it is that you're actually looking at. So that, for example, let me take, all right, Matthew 11:28, and let's go to that verb at the end, anapauso. If I was looking at that, immediately, the first thing I would be thinking of, when I was looking at that, I would say, does it look like that? No, this that looks like a regular verb there, and it looks like there's a sigma in it, so it's probably going to be future then, future indicative active, first person singular with the omega on the end and so forth. All right, so you look at it. But now, having said that, just to give you what this analytical Greek New Testament gives us, it gives us a breakdown of it. So under anapauso, it would say this. It says, you can't see it because it's too short, it's too small for me to show you. V-I-F-A-X-S. And if I look, it says here V for verb, and then next to that is I for indicative. In other words, it's a statement that's been made in the indicative. And then it says F. F means it's future, and A means it's active, and then X means it's first person, and S means it's singular. In other words, straight away you can actually find it in this analytical Greek New Testament that's put out by Baker, using this paradigm. That can be really helpful for you. If you were studying Greek for years and years, I wouldn't suggest that you necessarily use this. But in the complex nature of the Greek that we'll get, and then within a couple of years when you're actually translating something, or you're moving towards doing a Bible class, you need to get to the material as quickly as you can, right? So you get there, you know how to negotiate the Greek New Testament, you look for the verse that you're going through, you basically do a very rough translation of it as best you can from the standpoint of using your memory and then using the dictionary at the back. And then if you get stuck on something, as I say, ideally, I hate to say this to you, but I've done it myself with the time structures, is then I use one of these analytical Greek New Testaments where I use this paradigm and I can get to it quickly. And because I know all the paradigms, then I understand what it means when it says it's indicative, or it's imperative and so on, or the tense of the verb, whether it's imperfect and whether it's aorist and so on. And then it just helps me to get there as quickly as I can, and then I can deal with the syntactic elements and the semantic elements of what it means to put the thing together before I get to the joyous part, which is to make it applicable. In other words, then to apply it. So I just want to bring this out to you in terms of perhaps you might be interested in buying something like this analytical Greek New Testament. This is put out by Baker Bookhouse, edited by Barbara Freiberg and Timothy Freiberg. But there are several that are like it that will assist you as you go about your translation. If you want to go much further and much deeper in Greek, then this is a really good book by Daniel Wallace. This is mentioned in your syllabus, Greek Grammar Beyond the Basics. Basic grammar, and I've referred to this too in your syllabus, is the Greek Grammar of the New Testament by Blas de Brunner and our own. That is very, very useful. So all I'm doing there is just giving you just an overview of what would happen if you're actually translating something, and how do you get to it, and what do you do initially to get to the point where you're starting to really translate quickly, because that's what you want to do. All right, I'll leave you at that at this point. All right, thanks.